What's that?
I didn't attend, and can you upload it to YouTube?
Yeah, I stream concurrently to both YouTube and Twitch. So why don't we just cover some of that information? We won't have time to get into all of it. If you guys want to get some hands-on practice, we'll just go through some taking exercises. But let me share my screen. So I'm going to go ahead and stream this to, hold on.
Yeah, I looked for your last one. I was going to link it in the resource in rookies, but I couldn't find it.
Okay, share screen. Okay, we'll do that one. We'll go live. And let me, in order to capture this on my live stream, I'm going to have to add a window. There we go. Okay. Can you guys see this? Okay. Okay. So yeah, 'cause I've got like two monitors going. One's streaming to YouTube and Twitch. The other is this. All right. So why don't we just spend just a little bit of discussion time, and we can kind of make this sort of interactive. This is not a lecture by any means, and I've got a lot of content here that could easily cover an hour, but we can go through some of this if you want to talk about certain things. But the main thing to know, and maybe just an observation you guys have already made, is there's not a lot of tanks in ESO. And my theory is that tanking solo, so if you're trying to level up a tank, right, and you're doing the typical thing of, running quests and soloing content, it's frankly not very fun. And the reason why is it takes forever to kill anything, and it's almost impossible to get killed by anything on Overland as a tank, and it has mostly to do with the passive skills, which are all have to do with tanking, which is improving your survivability and your recovery. And it doesn't give you much in terms of actually improving your damage, which if you were going down the DPS line and leveling up that way, that's why it takes forever, along with just the sets, the typical tank sets you would typically wear. So it basically makes soloing as a tank not so fun versus doing something else. Now, if you're just getting into tanking, I think somebody mentioned they're fairly new. The question is it hard to tank? Well, as a beginner tank, doing nothing more than typically just taunting stuff, no, it's not, especially on normal content, because frankly, any four-person dungeon on normal doesn't require a tank. I think I've fake tanked every single dungeon, including the DLCs on normal without a tank. So it can be done. Some are a little bit more difficult, just depends on sort of the makeup of the group that you've got. But, essentially for just getting into tanking normal content, you do what I call newbie tanking, which is you apply taunt skill, whatever that may be. Typically, it would be pierce armor if you're using sword and board. If you take damage, you would heal as needed, rinse, repeat. That's what I call newbie tanking. For normal content, one-shot deaths for tanks are pretty much non-existent. You can ignore most mechanics, even in a lot of trials on normal. Now, the downside to newbie tanking is it really doesn't teach you anything about tanking at all, because it's not a challenge. And when you actually start to progress in your tanking journey and getting better, as you move up the ladder into vet and vet hard mode, those things start to become much more prevalent, where you actually are going to have to block. You're going to have to roll dodge damage. There's a lot of one-shots. So my advice that I generally give to anybody in tanking is, if you want to learn how to tank and tank well, is get into something that is actually difficult. So if you want to learn how to tank, start with vet content or vet hard mode. If you're not challenged, you're not learning. So that's sort of...
Nobody in a normal dungeon is going to let you tank.
Right, exactly. Yeah, by the time you get there, everything will already be dead. So, anyways, as far as tank roll, we talked a little bit about that. So, newbie tanking, basically hold taunt, grab aggro, don't die. If you can do that, that's 50% of being a tank, right? Probably the second one is really important, especially as you start to get into harder content. If you want to actually get beyond that and actually be what I call good, you're going to do all of that. Plus, you're going to do other things such as clustering and crowd control, right? So if the ads in the group that you're fighting are all spread out, your tank, if they're a good tank, is going to use your skills to start to group and stack stuff for you. So the DPS can pretty much just drop all their stuff at one place and everything dies. And you're going to wear some gear sets that's providing some benefits to your team members. And then going from good to better is doing all of that. And then we would add in that tanks would be using gear or skills to buff their teammates. They would be using gear and skills to debuff bosses and enemies. And then, I apologize for somebody's outside my house. And then the best tanks do all of that, but they also maximize their uptimes on all of that. So their buffs, debuffs, ultimates, they're every time they're available, they're maximizing the benefits of whatever they're bringing to the table. And on top of that, they can flex in any role. If you need your tank to do some off healing, they could do that. If you need your tank to do some additional damage, they could do that too. So your best tanks really can do it all and then some. So let me pause there. Any comments, questions on this? Okay, so
The important thing is don't die. That is absolutely true.
yeah, things go south pretty quickly, particularly in challenging content. The tank dies because then things start one-shotting all the squishies on the team. So we talked a little about taunt, right? Really important. So it's important to kind of understand what is taunt in this game. So if you're new to ESO, it's important to understand there is really no AoE taunt like in other games. Taunt is an ability that basically causes a non-player character to attack you or team member of your group. Taunt lasts for 15 seconds once it's applied. And that application can be done through either gear or skills. So you have several ways to do that. First is your one-handed shield skill line, which is a weapon skill line. You would either use Pierce Armor or Ransack. There's one under the Undaunted skill line called Inner Fire, which can be morphed to Inner Rage or Inner Beast. That also taunts. If you're an Arcanist, they have a couple of skills, again, depending on the morph, that will taunt. Frost Staff, Destructive Reach will apply taunt, and then a sort of a niche thing. This is more for like werewolf taunting or werewolf tanking. There's a Tormentor 5-piece armor bonus that applies taunt if you use specific types of skills. Okay. So taunt really important, and I do have my own preferences in terms of how I like to do it. And I think everybody, depending on the tank you're talking to, would probably have certain preferences in terms of what skills they prefer to use for taunting. Debuffs. I mentioned that good tanks, or better tanks provide debuffs, and there's typically a number of them that tanks are really expected to bring to the table, and probably the most important one is penetration. So the non-player characters in this game have 18,000 plus, I think it's 18,200 armor. The more that you can apply breach or strip away that armor value, the more damage actually gets through to what you're trying to kill. So tanks are really probably the first person on the team that's expected to do the most in terms of providing penetration to their team by doing what we call, stripping their armor, and that's applied mostly through major breach or minor breach. Pierce armor is a great skill because if you taunt that way, you apply both major and minor breach. And most good tanks are going to be using a infused crusher staff, probably an ice staff on their back bar. So with that crusher enchant, it's going to apply an additional 2,740 of a breach. So if you look up here at the top in this little table, at a minimum, most of your tanks should be getting close to 11 to 1,200 of penetration for the group. There are other things that teams will bring to the table, such as somebody in Alkosh. Often could be using Crimson. If you're in light armor, light armor has additional benefits, such as providing additional penetration, which will let more damage through. So it's an important concept. So when you think about how you equip your tank and which skills to use, that you figure out how are you going to provide that penetration to your team. Questions on penetration? A couple other ones that tanks should be bringing to the table: minor brittle could be provided, not necessarily by the tank, because there could be others in your team, such as healers, that are using a frost staff, or there's certain skill lines, such as what the Arc has, or Necros, that could provide brittle as well. But that basically, once they have minor brittle, there's an additional 10% damage taken, so it's a really nice debuff to have. Off balance and concuss is another nice debuff, which basically provides additional bonus damage if something is set off balance. And then lastly is minor maim. So that one is fairly easy to apply. There's a lot of different sources that can provide minor maim. But essentially that causes whatever is hit with minor maim to do 5% less damage done. So it's kind of the flip side of getting healed. So if you can actually reduce your damage output, it's beneficial to your team. And then also tanks have several sources of major maim, which is an additional 10% damage reduction. So a lot of this stuff that you see here, these are the sort of things that tanks should be doing in providing these types of buffs and debuffs for their team. Comments, questions? If you go to the Tank Club website or their Discord, either one, I know they have a link to a penetration calculator. So if you're like on a raid lead, or if you're getting to join a raid and you are aware of like what sets or skills your support team members are providing, you can kind of quickly calculate what breach or how much penetration is there. And so it'll tell you, there may be some instances maybe you don't need major breach. Maybe it's being provided by somebody else, but it's always good to know as a tank, like who's bringing what to the table, so you kind of know what gaps need to be filled. For an organized raid, it's usually the raid leader's responsibility to make sure that gear and skills are assigned in such a way that there is, roughly 18,000 of penetration provided, either through the supports or a combination of the DPS. Okay. Crowd control, mentioned crowd control in terms of the tanking role. So this is really important, particularly in trash mobs or fights where there are a lot of things kind of running around besides the boss. There may be elites, there may be other small mobs. Like if there's onesies and twosies, they're usually not a concern, but if there's, a lot, it's the team really should be looking to the tank to help pull those in or control them or lock them down. Ideally you want to group them up in a nice package and lock them down in such a way that it limits their movement so they can be killed quickly. Takes much longer if, DPS have to run around and kill these guys that are all spread out. So as far as crowd control, there's 3 kind of categories is the way I think of them. There's hard CCs, hardish, and soft. So hard CCs basically is it can't move, it can't do anything. It just is in limbo. Hard CCs last for 7 seconds. It could last short net, but after they've been hard CC'd, there is 7 seconds of immunity, meaning they can't be hard CC again. So hard CCs take the form of a stun, fear, pull, getting knocked down or disoriented. So again, you have to look at the specific skill to see how long that hard CC lasts. Most of them in game generally last 3 to 4 seconds. And again, after that occurs, now they have 7 seconds immunity, so they can start to move around, they can start to fight back. Hardish is basically an immobilization. They're rooted. They can still attack you, but they just can't move. A good example of that would be talons that DKs have. They basically lock down groups. And again, that will last a few seconds, but once it's been applied, they have 3 seconds immunity where you can't use that same another immobilization skill on them until that 3 seconds is over. So as a tank, if you know you're going to a fight, particularly like dungeons where there's a lot of trash, oftentimes I will use a combination of a hard CC like a fear along with talons. So you could fear something, they can't do anything, 3 or 4 seconds. On top of that, then you drop talons on top of that, or you could do talons first and then the fear. And that gets them completely locked down for anywhere from 6 to 8 seconds, which is usually long enough for your team to just drop a bunch of stuff on them and they're all dead. Soft CCs, basically just a snare or a silence, meaning they can't do an attack, or they are slowed, but they're not necessarily just can't move at all. Questions on CCs? Okay, lastly, I will talk about just kind of a basic setup. So this is what I call a typical model for a bar setup. I'm not saying this is the way you have to do it. There's a lot of different versions of what works for people and what doesn't, but in general, most tanks would typically use a sword and shield front bar and a back bar staff. Back bar staff most often would be a frost staff with an infused crusher glyph. On the front bar, obviously you should have a taunt. So in this case, we I'm showing, Pierce Armor, which applies both major and minor breach. Then you're going to have a shield skill and a self-heal. So the ones that are in red, the red font, those are what I call the must-haves. You should have this on your bar regardless of class. So an example of a shield skill would be like Igneous for DKs, or and Coagulating Blood or Green Dragon's Blood as a self-heal. Let's say you're a Warden, maybe you might use Polar Wind as your self-heal, but that'll allow you to taunt. You're going to take a lot of damage, so you're going to use shields for damage mitigation, and then you're going to use a self-heal to heal back up, right? So that's your bread and butter. This is what you're going to be doing a good portion of the time. The other items that I have in this example are what I call flex slots, meaning those could be any skills depending on the fight, depending on what your raid lead needs, depending on what your team needs. As a default, I call these flex slots, but I would suggest if you don't have anything better, minor maim through heroic slash is good, because when you apply minor maim, you got 5% less damage being done to your team. In addition, it provides you with minor heroism, which allows you to generate ulti faster. Defensive stance is good because it's a secondary shield skill. It does provide a very nice shield. In addition, it gives you 10% additional block mitigation, damage mitigation while you're blocking. If we look at the back bar, this is what I call the utility bar. These are the additional things that are going to either provide utility to your team or to help you buff or debuff. So the first is your CC abilities. So you may have it could be Talons, it could be, Fear like Turn Evil. You should have a pull ability, particularly in trash mobs. Would be Unrelenting Grip. Depending on the class you're playing, you may have a class-based pull. The default is if you don't have a class-based pull ability, then it would be Silver Leash. I'll add that Silver Leash is not a great pull because it's pretty stamina intensive. Usually you can get probably 2 or 3 pulls and then you completely use all of your stamina. You'll have some sort of a range taunt. I recommend having a range taunt on the back bar. So, for example, if you're locked on a particular bar, a good example would be like VCR, when you have the bad bar mech, that you have ability to taunt at range. And again, that will vary depending on the class. The default for most classes would be Inner Rage or Inner Fire, but you also have Ice Reach if you're using a Frost Staff. That applies taunt, also applies a major maim. Elemental Blockade is what you're going to use to proc your Crusher enchant for additional armor stripping. And then the flex slot is a buff or debuff. Here I'm showing balance, which is really good because you do want to have, as a tank, some source of major my mind went blank. So it's the skill that provides you, roughly an additional 5,900 of additional armor. I'm trying to look for, Major Resolve. Thank you. So, and again, ultimates could be anything, but as a tank, one of the best buffs you can provide, one of the best buffs in the game is Warhorn, which provides major courage, 20% additional crit damage. It restores resources. So this is something that, unless you're told differently, tanks should be running Warhorn. The other ultimate could be anything you want. On front, if you're running front bar and you don't have anything else specific to run, one other good utility skill ultimate, because it's so dang cheap, is Shield Discipline. So why do I say Shield Discipline? And again, this is sort of like new to intermediate tanking. If you're more advanced tanking, you probably wouldn't run this one. But One is particularly if you're a DK and you want to kind of boost your resources every time you cast an ultimate skill, it will do that. So because this is so cheap, it's a good way to quickly get all of your resources back. But it provides 8 seconds of holding it's holding block for you. So for example, if your entire team is dead except you, this allows you to hold block. It'll hold block for you while you're actually wrestling somebody. Or you have to run from point A to B while the boss is trying to one-shot you in the back. It basically is holding block while you're running from point A to B. So you can sustain getting hit multiple times while you're kind of doing something else. All right, questions on this? Everyone's quiet.
It's a lot of information to absorb.
Okay. So I'm going to pause there. There's more info I could cover, but I didn't want to necessarily go through all of it unless you had specific questions. So let me kind of throw it back at you guys and say, is there any questions particularly around tanking that you want to talk about?
Zeke had a couple of questions. I made a channel of them.
Oh, yeah, I see it. Okay, so you made an Nord Arcanist tank. What skill should I use? In what order? Okay. Should Nord Arcanist. So let's talk about Nords first. So Nord's a really good race selection because as a Nord, you get the race provides you, line of health, a line of stamina. You get additional bonuses for ultimate generation. You get additional resistances as a Nord, so which is always good. Arcanist, I think, as a class, is probably one of the top tanking classes in terms of what they bring to the table. They have just a wide assortment of things in their toolkit that they can bring that before Arcanists were actually a class that you'd have to go to multiple different races or gear sets to provide. So I think running an Arcanist tank is really great. I don't see them, honestly, sort of being upsetting DKs as sort of the top tank class. The only reason I see that, because actually I think Arcanists probably bring more to the table, is DKs are so easy to run as a tank, particularly as a beginner tank. So I did see Mazik, the build you provided, which makes sense. I think I wouldn't necessarily get locked into running certain skills. I would definitely explore, run your tank as is, but don't be afraid to swap in skills as you need them, because I think that's one of the things that tanks will probably do more than any other role in a group, is you'll be constantly swapping skills in and out on your bars based on the fight, based on the trial. But, kind of going back to the bar setup, you're always going to have, a taunt on each bar. You're going to have a shield, a self-heal, or maybe 2 shields and 1 self-heal, or maybe 1 shield and 2 self-heals. You're going to need to think about how you're doing or how your damage mitigation is. And you may get halfway through a trial and realize, you know what, I'm doing really great. I don't need this additional heal. Maybe I should swap something in. So that's why you have to kind of remain flexible in terms of how your bar is set up. And honestly, there's some fights where you may not even need a pull. I know there's several trials where I never use a pull. It's not needed. So, I wouldn't get kind of too locked into your mindset as to how your bars have to be set up. Really good question. So probably the most important thing about tanking is back to knowing the fights. So And the only way that comes is through experience or either talking to other other tanks. But, watching videos helps, but nothing replaces actual experience and content. So particularly, as I mentioned earlier, on normal, you pretty much never have to block. You're so tanky and have enough health and resistances where there's really nothing that stuff will do where you have to block. But it becomes much more important in vet content and as well as the mechanics. So you'll know probably the first thing to learn is heavy hits. So anything on vet, when a boss or something is channeling, they'll have like little red squiggly lines coming out from them. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
I don't, but I'll look for it.
Okay, so basically there'll be about a couple of seconds where I call it sort of their wind up, where they will have a visual indication that they're about to unleash a heavy hit on you. Those generally have to be blocked, or they should be blocked. Depending on the boss, it may or may not one-shot you, but you don't want to unnecessarily take damage if you can help it. So anytime you see a heavy hit, you want to block that. The other option is you could roll dodge it. Some bosses in some trials hit so hard, their heavy hits will hit you so hard, it could almost one-shot you. And it's better to just roll dodge it, because then you take 0 damage versus taking the damage and then having to heal it back up. So again, that depends on the tank, on how they want to handle that. It depends on how much resources. If you've got a lot of resources, you can say, okay, this time I'm going to roll dodge. Maybe the next one I'm going to block.
Add-ons like crucial alerts tell you when to block and when to roll.
Generally, yeah, they do. Codes Combat alerts will usually have some sort of a mechanics indicator with a bar indicating a timer. And so generally, depending on the mechanic, it'll tell you, when to roll dodge or whatever.
Okay, that's great, because Josie recommended I grade something and it told me when to roll dodge for taking.
Yes, yeah, for Hoff. Yep.
So something similar will appear for the tank.
Right, exactly. So I won't go too deep into this concept, but resistances are an important part of gearing out your tank. And it's important because just like NPCs have armor, tanks, the more resistances you have, the more damage mitigation you get. So the hard cap, or what we call the hard cap, simply means that anything above 33,000 resistances gives you no additional benefit for damage mitigation. If it's maxed out, if you have 33,000 or more of resistances, any damage coming into you is cut by 50% right off the top. So again, 33,000 resistances gives you 50% damage mitigation. There's nothing you have to do. It's just the armor itself is giving you that damage mitigation. So that's important, but there's other ways to reduce damage. So, the first, obviously, you do want 33K resistance or close to it. I generally say around 30K is sufficient. But what equally important is blocking, because you mentioned, like, when do I know how to block? Well, that's, again, it depends on what's coming at you, but anytime you can block, it's worth doing, because blocking in and of itself gives you 50% damage mitigation. So even if your armor was 0, let's say you're a light armor wearer, if you just block, you're going to cut out 50% of the damage. But the two combined is really where it really helps. So, if you kind of look at the math, if you have 102 coming in at you and you're maxed on your resistances, that will turn into 51K coming at you. But then if you block on top of that, you're only going to get hit with 25. And let's say your health is around 40K. Well, you'll still have 15K of health left, and that could easily be healed back up. So, yeah, blocking is really important, and that's why I say the sooner you get into challenging content, it's going to force you to learn how to actually tank, because in harder content, tanks actually do have to block. And there's nothing wrong with blocking a lot. It's just that you'll learn after a while you don't need to block, do what I call perma blocking, just blocking, most of the time. Because you'll start to learn to read like what you're fighting against, and like when to block and when it's not necessary.
Okay, thanks.
Hi-Mage, I have a question if it's an okay time.
Yeah, go ahead.
With that part? Okay.
Yep, go for it.
Just to set the premise for my question, I've been running a lot of trials in my sword to gain gear for my DK that I've leveled, and in doing so, it really the only limiting factor in my question is is having transmute crystals, which obviously take time to get. So with that being said, what are in the other challenges? There just seems to be so many different possible sets for tanks to use for different purposes. So I've asked other people on what their thoughts are. I was wondering what your suggestions are for if taking that into consideration that let's say I have most of the gear, at least a fair amount of it, and the only limiting factor is transmutes. What are the top 2 sets you might recommend to someone to go for right away to at least have something to bring to the table? For instance, what's been suggested to me so far would be, to start off with, is getting something like Pearlescent and Sax with Nazare, and then like Sax and PA with Archdruid. But you might have other suggestions or agree with those? Because it's hard to have, most tanks that are seasonal probably have 4, 5, 6, 7 different possibilities, right? But
Yeah, I would agree with that. So what I would do is, if you look at a lot of the trial signups, it'll typically specify, the raid will typically specify what they're looking the tanks to wear. Now, if let's say you're starting off going from, let's say, veteran dungeon tanking, and you're going to start off tanking, you're not like quite ready to make the jump to main tanking, but you want to do off tanking and vet trials. So a good way to start off is Sax PA. Fairly easy, and obviously with powerful assault, you want that in weapons and jewelry, Sax and body, and then you could wear Naz, or there's a lot of other good options. Archdruid would be another option. Pearlescent Ward, absolutely, you want to get that. It's a great set to have. Now, there's a lot of things you could do in terms of pairing things with Pearlescent Ward. If you look at the tanking, if you're trying to get tagged as a tank, right, there's certain set requirements. I would go off that and try and start collecting some of those sets.
okay, that's a great suggestion.
So, oftentimes you may or may not have a necro tank. So, in instances where I'm not sure if I'm going to have, let's say it's an open sign up, I'm not sure if I'm going to have a necro tank, I'll ask for the main tank to wear PWTT, and off tank to wear Sax PA. Yolnahkriin, having said that, Yolnahkriin is still worth collecting. It's just not as prevalent as it was before, because your source of minor courage now can be provided by an Arcanist in the group. So now you may not necessarily, force one of your Arcanists to run Xena's Empowering Disc to provide that buff. That being the case, it might be worthwhile to think about maybe using, let's say, PW and Yuln. But right now, I would say probably PWTT and then Sax PA on your off tank would probably be the most common scenario. Crimson is there worth having only if you don't think you're going to have enough pen in the group. So that's the only use case for Crimson Oath for using it is if you don't think you have enough penetration in the group to maximize your damage.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, technically, I'm assuming most people in organized is going to have an Alkash person.
Yeah.
And then the last question about the gear is I see a lot of people running prismatic glyphs, but for somebody just starting out that maybe isn't ready to spend all of that to do that, would reinforce be a reasonable, or not reinforce, but what would be a reasonable glyph to use instead of that? What would you suggest just going through that?
So the way I think about it is looking at resources, right? So the reason you pick your glyph is you're trying to maximize your resources based on what you need as a tank. And that formula will vary depending on the tank, your class, and so on. But I provide just some general kind of guidelines that when I'm tanking, I want my health to be somewhere between 35 to 45. Generally, low 40s is, for me personally, is what I'm comfortable with as my sweet spot, and probably what I see most commonly. If I see somebody is a tank and their health is above 50, I really kind of question the wisdom of that. But I've seen it before. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just that it means they're giving something else up. If their health is that high, that means they have less resources elsewhere. So I begin to wonder how they are going to manage that. And then for stam, I generally like to have my stam, somewhere north of 21, 22K, and then mag, somewhere around at least 15 at a minimum, but ideally you want around 18K. Now to get to these resource pools, yes, it's easiest to get there if you use tri-stack glyphs, because the glyph itself, and the reason why it's so expensive is it gives you three of those, gives you health, stam, and mag all at the same time. Now, you could still get to kind of where you're comfortable as a tank by using mostly health glyphs. And then depending on the sets, and usually this is where I vary it, is the monster set I'm wearing, is you could, let's say you're low on stam. You want to get your stam up a little bit more. Replace a health glyph with a stam glyph, right? If you can't do tri-stats. So it's the easiest thing, and it's probably the cheapest way to go because, a glyph will cost, 13 to 15K, maybe 18K per glyph. So it's not unreasonable to, buy a couple glyphs based on what you need to get your resource pools to where you're going to feel effective.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Other questions? Don't be afraid to jump in.
Maybe just one thing I'll say. When you're starting out tanking versus people that have been tanking for a while, their views might differ to where you're starting. So
Exactly.
just learn tanking at the beginning and not worry too much about these fancy setups like double like stat.
Yeah, exactly.
Jewels and stuff. Your mage up when you're beginning, you're gonna taunt, you're gonna block. And eventually, like the mage says, it's all about learning when things are going on, seeing the fights, and stuff like that. So
Yeah, and you'll see a wide variation of opinions. It doesn't necessarily mean, one person is right or wrong. I mean, there's several ways to achieve a goal, right? So, although, I think in general, there's kind of general agreement about kind of the big decisions, but, yeah, I would say if you're learning and talk to a lot of people, talk to a lot of different tanks. Everyone has kind of their own point of view. If no one has other questions, I was thinking what we could do is maybe actually get who actually wants to get into get on their tank and do something.
Just want to show off something.
Just get some hands-on practice. If not, we can continue to talk. It doesn't matter to me.
Somebody must have a tank.
Okay. So the plan is get in your tank. Let's go jump into something, and see how you do. Yeah. Here, I'm going to jump on my tank. I'll start tossing out invites. You let me know if you want an invite.
Where are you?
You'll see. You'll find out. And I'll stream this. Okay, who wants an invite?
I'm on another account right now, but
Hey, anybody on their tanks?
Why not? Let's give it a go.
Let's go for it. Let's do this.
I was just logging mine in.
Let's not be bashful, folks. We're gonna have fun.
I think
That's
we
what I
don't know
said
what we're
last
doing.
We're gonna have some
and
laughs.
that's the whole point. Just get on your things.
This is not a it's not a much of a workshop if we're not getting on our tanks.
I'll take an invite, but I don't have a tank set up at all.
Not a problem. Okay, Ed, we'll get you in here.
I'm logging to Ambo's account, so I can't really log in.
I'm on a new character.
Mazik, you got a tank, don't you? Let's get him in here.
Yeah, I'm logging in.
But
I have a lot of background noise right now, so that's why
That's
I've been
fine.
muted for the majority of the time. I don't want to disturb the conversation.
I just changed my stream to ESO.
You can invite me, Hi-Mage, but for some reason I can't seem to chat in chat on this character. That is so weird.
Maybe you get a social ban.
The social-
Too
That
many
happened to one of
bad
our guild
jokes.
leaders. Sent an email once, and
banned.
she got social banned for 72 hours.
Well, I could chat
Wow.
in the FTC too, but I couldn't in
Oh, that's
one.
weird.
I don't know. Hey,
Okay, who else?
I think Mazik was getting on.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still logging in, but I'm on a DPS setup because I was trying to level Undaunted and
That's
the
fine. Did
heavy
you
armor.
use a armorer to manage your setups?
Yes.
Okay, it'd be very easy to change then.
Somewhat related, but mostly unrelated question.
Okay.
Does anyone else have a weird bug whenever they use the armorer, where they like reset the stuff, and then they go like I have a blank slot in my armorer on purpose, basically for a free respec, and whenever I use it, and then I do my attributes, it won't let me select any skills until I reload UI. Like it just won't let me spend any of my skill points.
I
Yeah.
haven't.
No, I haven't
As
seen
soon
that.
as I reload UI, it works fine and I don't have any problems. But for whatever reason, they don't like it.
Oh, we're going to Hi-Mage's house. I see.
Temporarily till I get.
Oh,
Anybody else?
so you get all the suckers
No,
in
I'll
here?
join you guys in a few minutes. Just gonna switch accounts.
I don't want to scare anybody away by going there first, and they're like, "Oh shit, I don't want to go in there."
It's a great way to sell it. Hey, you could be scared away. Don't worry, it'll be fine.
Did I go in my trash setup or boss setup?
Whichever. Not going to matter as a tank because we're not really going to kill much.
I probably should have set up her bars as you were going through that stuff.
I'll provide the DPS on my new character.
So you're on Abo's account?
Yeah,
Okay.
getting
So-
her tickets.
Says you're in a group.
Oh yeah, probably in group with myself. Give me a sec. But she's not on tank, so let me just finish getting her tickets, and I'll join you guys on
Okay.
my account.
All right, why don't we go ahead and we're going to go ahead and go in. We are going to go to Asylum Sanctorium.
Oh, alright.
There haven't been pilgrims in some time.
So when you get here, we'll go in. We're going to go get in front of St. Olms. And when I was learning how to tank many years ago, one of the mentors I had said, "Hey, why don't you go practice on this guy? It's something you could do on your own. It's going to teach you about visually reading what the boss is doing and how to react to it. And in fact, if you main tank St. Olms, it's really good practice because you want to keep that dragon kind of facing the same way so it doesn't do a steam breath in the group. So I'm going to go ahead and go in. Okay, so the way we'll do this exercise is we're just going to practice trying to stay alive, which is the kind of the whole point. It's half of tanking, taunting, and staying alive. If you can do that, you're 50% successful. So what we'll do is we'll do this in pairs where I'd like to get one person to stand back here. And you are there to kite the charges, which is usually what the tank healer does. And by the way, when I tank this and I have a tank healer, I tell the tank healer, look, you don't really have to do anything. I don't care if you heal, just don't die. Your main purpose is stand back there as you can take those lightning charges that get tossed. Okay, so essentially what we're going to do is we're going to just taunt this boss and want to try and keep him facing this direction, the main tank direction. And you can either roll dodge, and the tip there I have, as soon as he raises his right arm, which will look like the left arm as you face him, as soon as he raises it, you want to immediately do a roll dodge. It's as easy as that. He'll generally do, those are called swipes. If you take a swipe without blocking or roll dodging, it's usually a one shot for most tanks. You don't generally want to take 2 swipes in a row without healing because they do, even while you're blocking, they'll do enough damage to 2 in a row without healing will usually kill you. So if I have enough stam, I usually just like to roll dodge. Depending on your tank build, you can also just block and heal. So, well,
Do you want me to bring a healer?
No, we don't need a healer.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't need any healing at all. We just need somebody cutting the charges. So I'll do this. Let's just see how long. Well, if we can, goal is to last 2 minutes on this, and then we'll rotate out, and unless you die, and then give someone else a chance. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I got him. Yeah, I roll dodge that. Nobody's kiting my charges.
Oh, Super was back there. I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it. We can't have too many people back here, or he throws more. He throws more charges.
And then if obviously you want to get out of the way of steam. I'm just going to block. Okay, so you guys kind of get the idea. Who wants to go next? Hey, someone take over.
I got it. Oh, I jumped and didn't roll.
Hey, someone else's turn.
Now I'll tell you as a tank healer that you that's too close.
Yeah, I'm not on a tank. I'm just. He's just aggroed onto me.
Okay, so who's got taunt on this guy?
I'll do it.
Okay,
Although I'll
Josie's
be
next.
dead.
I'll kite the charges.
Oops.
Okay, someone jump in.
Well, 70K, that hurts.
The one thing I say about Arcanist, what's great about Arcanist, that usually any other class you'll need to be like on a Nord or an Imperial, but on the Arcanist, I'm on a Dark Elf. I'm actually over the cap of resistances by doing nothing but using Arcanist skills, which
Yeah,
is
like see,
fantastic.
I can like usually when I'm main tanking this, I will just block 90% of the time rather than roll dodge. But roll dodging is the easiest way. I mean, you can sit here and just roll dodge all day long. That's why people kind of joke about being the main tanker in a VAS, because there's really nothing to do except stand here. Okay, who wants to go next? This is meant to give you guys some practice.
Let's see if I can redeem myself.
If you want to go, just grab taunt.
Are you on a Hi-Mage or Chosen?
I'm on Hi-Mage.
Don't come any closer. The other trick of this boss is keeping him still.
Yeah.
Have him hit.
Oh, why did he hit me? I didn't even taunt him.
What's the best way to reposition this boss if he gets out of whack?
Well, I'm out of range.
Yeah, do a taunt at range, and he'll line up with you.
Got this out.
Thank you.
Are you taunting him on a DP?
I don't have a tank.
Holy shit, crazy, bro.
You can tank as a non-tank. Just roll dodge everything.
Oh my god. There's the hen. So this boss, the one thing I learned from JT was from console players, just like it's a great like place to learn how to watch what the boss do and learn things about him that the game doesn't give you. Like when he raises his hands when you're blocking. You don't even need add-ons.
Look,
Yep.
guys, we might get him to hide.
Yeah, see, all you need to do is watch his hand, roll dodge. Whenever he
No.
raises that hand, you just roll dodge. Just heavy hit, roll dodge. Gotta keep that stam up. Someone taunt him. Someone take him
Not
off
me.
me.
Get ready to jump. Probably taking us 10 minutes to get him down 10%.
Oh, he's actually gonna do a jump. Get ready to kite. We actually spawned the minis. All right, let's go ahead and wipe
Really?
it. Yeah, let's start over.
I either made a mistake or the guy didn't tell me to slot a self heal.
Yeah, it's overrated. That Vigor is a nice heal.
Okay, so let's do this for another couple of minutes. Anybody else want to give it a shot before we move on? We'll go to one other place. No, no takers.
It's pretty fun, guy.
I'll give it one more try.
Whenever he raises that hand, just roll dodge, and then get some heavy hits in so you can regen your stam.
All right.
Oh, you needed somebody to kite that.
I got it.
Oh, we're not going to count that one. You're not off the hook that easy.
Trying to get him to move. I guess I should have just left him where he
Okay.
was.
There you go. Okay, let Josie grab him. Oh,
No, I will come practice that by myself one day. I had no idea that
Lunge, grab him
Like,
off of me whenever you
hard.
can.
yeah, you got it. Get out of that steam. Get out of the steam.
He's a lot of fun, isn't he, Josie?
Grab him off of me, Josie. Are you ready?
Oh no, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah, as soon as he raises
hanging
that
back,
hand,
doing
like
the
as soon,
deal
like as soon as he
thing.
moves that hand, you want to roll
Yeah.
dodge.
Oh yeah, you got punished, bro.
Okay, we're gonna do something a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and
I
die.
jumped instead of rolled.
There we go.
We'll do one last exercise here.
You got to do it like just before he does it.
Yeah, that's all you have to do. That's all. Just do it before he does it. Yeah.
You just have to see it coming.
Raises his hand, and before he actually swings, you got to roll that.
Yeah, as soon as he moves that left or his right hand, you want to immediately go to the roll dodge. Okay,
Yeah,
so
it's kind
we are gonna go to one other place.
I bet it's HRC to do.
I was gonna say,
trash
is it
mob.
HRC? That first poll.
Oh no.
I love you.
So only 4 of us at a time can get in here. I'm just gonna. So if you guys want to watch my stream either on Discord
Yeah,
or
I'll
on,
drop in and watch this stream.
Yeah, I'll just watch. Yeah.
we just need. I'm gonna temporarily. Oh shoot! You know I'm not. I'm on the wrong spec. That's fine. Okay, come on in.
I'm going to watch too.
Okay.
I think all the people that said they just want to watch need to be the ones to go in. Oh, he's out.
Oh, I'm down to 3 people.
Oops.
I need one other beginner tank with me.
Invite me
And
back.
head, I could use your DPS. You can stay too.
This is so weird. I don't know why I can't talk in the guild chats.
Okay, guys, come on, port into me, and we are going to. I like this as a beginner tanking exercise. Just the twins, these twin ogres, and I'll tell you why. And that's because there are several mechanics that are helpful to manage as a beginner tank, because it shows that you can keep taunt on stuff while at the same time dealing with mechanics, which is a really important skill to have as a tank. And here in this very first fight, they actually show you one of the first mechanics, which is those little yellow circles that turns you into a big popsicle.
Do you guys know about the achievement in here?
Which one?
I almost got him, didn't I, Chewie?
Oh, you can. Yeah, definitely. There is.
Is it the Super Sky Shard? Is that
It's a
the
dead
joke?
body.
Is
You
it
can
dead
land
body?
on that dead body. Yeah, yeah, on a ledge, and if you can land, you get a special achievement.
Ah,
One of
that sounds pretty special. Hello.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
The stream ended.
Yeah, for some reason my my thing crashed. Discord crash. I had to get back in. Okay, we're making our way up here to the twins. One more pull or 2 more pulls. Poison's pretty bad
Oh my
stuff.
gosh!
Yeah, we're getting.
All the poisons.
Yeah, let's take care of this ad before we start the twins here. All right. So the way we're going to work this is, who wants to go first? Here, I'll go first. Just an example. Now, what we're going to do is there's several phases of this fight. So generally what the tank will do is basically take the guy on the outside. And we don't want to get them too close to each other because they'll start to generate the poison aura around them. So I'm just going to keep them on the outside. And we don't really care if we kill them or not. We're just going to practice keeping taunt on this guy. And when the yellow circle shows up, don't go in too early. That happened the other night.
That ad walked up behind us and
Yeah.
aggroed.
Yeah, stay away from that. Okay. Okay. So you find a circle, but don't go in yet. Okay, get into your circle. Wasn't supposed to happen. Okay, now we want to get behind an ice pillar. And whoever's got the boss, just keep holding on to him. Yeah, I'm gonna grab him. Okay, circle phase again. Make sure you get into a circle if you have not done that yet. Okay, who wants to grab this guy on the outside? Get behind a pillar. He's out of resources.
Oops. Oh, the poison's gonna get me. Hey, ice pillars.
That fight you're on right now, I swear to God, is way harder than even the hard moon in here. Is a try killer.
All right. So how did everyone feel about that? Tanking that?
It's harder than it looks.
I think you guys did a pretty good job.
I think the having to be mobile to get out of the junk while also keeping the boss relatively steel for the DPS to do something.
Yeah.
Is kind
No,
of
actually, I'm glad you brought that
give
point
and
up.
take of
It's
it.
really important because I think, especially in newer tanks, it takes them a while to get the concept that while kiting a boss is fine to keep you alive if you have to, it's sometimes better to just keep the boss as stationary as you can because you can get better damage on something that's just stationary rather than if it's moving around chasing the tank.
Now, when you're doing something like that, all those little, like the little dogs that come out, do you try to pull those in, or do you just let the DPS
The
take care of them?
skeevers?
Yeah.
Well, in this fight, I'd never bother with them. Yeah,
Just let the DPS go.
because what
Some
they
fights you would pull them in.
well, I wouldn't pull them in because what they do is as soon as they get close to somebody, they drop their poison circle, and then you just have to get out of it because it'll kill you pretty quickly. So I would rather the DPS kill them at range because they die pretty quickly anyways.
Well, that was fun. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Well, we are pretty much at time for this little session. Hopefully you got something out of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks,
I
Hi-Mage.
might actually gear my tank up.
Hey, hey.
All right, we'll probably do another one in a month or so, Josie.
Yeah. Let's see. Next, I want to do healing. So I've talked to Face about that.